We're live. Hi, everyone. Another video about Operation Cricket with Jackson. Hi, Jackson.
Hey all.
And this one, last time we did a video where we talked about Jackson's predictions for what would happen. Um, and I guess yours were largely informed by both knowing many of the players and by having seen a lot of the minis coming and sort of knowing how the theme scores are going to affect everything. Today is going to be all about the competition, the games themselves, because today we're getting my predictions, and they will of course be only focused on, as I usually do, the lists themselves. How do I see them? How do I rank them? And what do I think will happen based on that? As always, both for Jackson and for everyone else, the caveat is I'm just one guy on the internet. If I dislike your list, sorry. And my list ranking stuff is very focused on competitive play. I'm not taking into account any of the themes or any of all that. Your army might be perfectly themed, very historical. I for me doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to predict games. So, right, you ready, Jackson? Let's go and see.
Yep.
Right. So I made the PowerPoint. This is it. And no, why doesn't it? Just here we go. So the meta of Operation Cricket. The event itself, Jackson, just talk us briefly through it.
Sure. Yeah. So it's I guess just breaking it down. 1250 points. 1 to 2 generic platoons. You can add campaign units or theater selector units depending on if you want to send something to me. If you have the book to prove it, then largely it's going to get in. Um, 16 order dice caps, single day tournament, 3 games. There was a veterancy rule, so basically to force you to take not the lieutenant as a tax, but
Yeah,
rather someone who could realistically lead your force. So if you have majority regular units, take a regular lieutenant. Majority veteran, take a veteran lieutenant.
yeah,
Um, and then I had a limit of one multi launcher, 1 heavy howitzer, and then 2 flamers. And then between all the free stuff that you could take, it'd be up to a max of 100 points. So yeah, that's roughly the comp.
yeah.
Um,
And then there were sportsmanship scores and theme scores, which also count towards your overall score. So the results, the end results are going to be heavily influenced by that as well, which I sort of like for a thematic event. Putting that out in front means that people know that you're getting your points also for how you've painted your army, how you've themed your army, how you've thought about all that. Um, so that like competitive players like myself would know in advance that if I want to win this event, I'm gonna have to up my painting skill and maybe think about theme, read a history book or two, which would be really good. I also kind of really like the your rule for a maximum of 100 point of free stuff. In many of my tournaments, I'm running. You can only have one free unit, but 100 points does sort of the same thing for me, which is like have the insanity that is maybe British Indians or whatever. So right, that's the event. And right now, the lists that we've seen have an average order dice of 13.2, with the most common being 14 order dice. We have one list that is in the low end of the spectrum, with one 9 to 10 order dice, and then they sort of increase in numbers as you go up towards the 16 order dice cap. Um, how did you feel about this one list being in 9 to 10, the 9 to 10 bracket? We already talked a little bit about how that might struggle, didn't we?
yes, yeah. So going back to our last video, that was Greg, and
Yeah.
this is going to be his first tournament. Um, except what? So I'm excited to see how he performs.
Mm,
But I guess the big one in his list is not a lot, but massive full strength units of veteran infantry,
yeah.
as well as a Sherman Easy 8. And
Yeah.
so while the low order dice may struggle in the objective missions, come the kill
It might.
point mission, like we
Yeah.
talked about last time, that
Yeah.
might come into his favor because
Yeah.
everything that he has can kill stuff and is dangerous at that level.
And
Um,
very, very survivable at the same time. So yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
how I structured the missions was any build could at least find its niche in one of the three
Mm.
missions.
And I think as soon as you comp something, as soon as you make like rules of having a cap for order dies or whatever, you start having a new Goldilocks zone where the order dice count is sort of optimized for either like survivability or as many order dice as possible, and getting that balance just right. I think most of your players have that balance between 14 to 15, 16 dice, which is a really nice place to balance it. Um, so I think that we, for me, I was looking for lists that I thought, just based on lists, would be in that bracket for the top placements, at least for winning the games, the actual games. Maybe not for theme or painting skill.
Mhm.
Then the nation spread. For me, it was a little surprising to see only 5 American lists. Um, there is a tendency for people who live in one of the major nations to play that nation more often, and I see this in many American tournaments that American lists are much more common than they would be in Europe, say. So I would actually expect American lists to be the most common one, but German lists are, which was a nice surprise, and a nice for balance as well. Um, so we've seen 7 German lists, 5 American lists, 2 British, 2 Soviets, 2 French, which was a little bit of a surprise, but we already talked about the lists for that. They are some really nice, leaning into the tough fighter and colonial troop lists. Um, 1 Japanese, 1 Finnish, 1 Hungarian, 1 Italian, and 1 partisan lists. So really a nice spread across many nations for me here. I like to see that there are like 5 minor nations that are actually represented. It sucks a little bit that there's only 1 Japanese list, and I'm not seeing many Japanese lists, not in competitive tournaments, and apparently neither in tournaments that also have theme score here. Were you surprised by the spread of the nations here?
A little bit. So I think I'll definitely. I was very happy to see all the different minor powers because that was largely that was following me adding the best minor power as a separate category
Mm,
because I wanted to see those lesser factions go up. Um, but yeah, 7 Germany versus and 1 Japan for the Axis was a bit interesting to see. I was thinking maybe there would be 2 or 3
yeah,
Japanese lists,
yeah,
um, but it seems like a lot of the folks want their toys, especially like in the U.S. It's very common you grab Band of Brothers, split it with a
yeah,
friend or something like
yeah,
that. So it's very easy to wind up with Americans or Germans,
yeah.
and so a
I
lot of
think
people just kind of
I
have
think
that in
that's
their
common
connection.
for everyone to have that box, and start at that box and just split it with a friend. So yeah, you might actually see a lot of players just because they have that in collection, their collection, the Germans. So bringing them, yeah. Also,
But
I
also at
think,
the big points level, you're going to get
yeah,
the big heavy tanks, and the Germans have the
oh,
cool gear, the cool tanks.
yeah.
So you're going to be able to
Lots of
let
really
see the
nice
big
modeling
cats.
and painting opportunities with the big cats and stuff. Yeah. Um, so that might be why that Germany became so popular here. Although you do
Mm.
have some nice American tanks as well. Although, of course, mainly Sherman based. Right. Then we have the builds themselves. Now, Jackson, I'm not sure how familiar you are with my list build theory here, but the idea is that you can sort of roughly divide lists into to groups of what they want to do. For me, there were 13 of the lists that were skirmish heavy or mixed bag lists, that had a lot of infantry that could skirmish, or vehicle units like recce jeeps or whatever that had skirmish ability. And for 22 lists, I think it was 22 or 23 we had in, right?
Mhm.
13 skirmish lists is kind of heavy. It's something that I'm seeing both in Europe and in the US, that skirmish lists are becoming more popular. I think it's because they are more accessible, and they're something where you don't have to have a very specific idea about what you want to do with your army. You can sort of react to what's on the table, and you got, for multiple different missions, you got something, right? Um, so that is a trend I'm seeing both in competitive and in non-competitive events. And then 10 Death Star lists, and this is of course your pack, Jackson, that really builds into that, the heavy tanks, the 9+, the 10+ in some cases tanks. Um, so and with the high order dice count and the dice cap, that is something that we expect to see. Do I expect them to do well? Possibly not, but I think with the theme and the painting, I think you might have an edge in the Death Star builds and in some of your missions, because the missions are very geared towards a boxing match in the middle of the board where Death Stars might do a little better. So it will be really interesting once we get to have this conversation again, Jackson, about what actually happened. Um, how did the Death Stars actually perform? Did they actually do what they were supposed to do? Are we seeing something where Death Stars, like heavy tanks, might be a thing again, that has chance, or were they just outplayed? We're going to see. I saw 3 Soda tank lists, which are like lists that have a lot of armor vehicles, Rain Carrier spam or whatever. And only 2 lists that leaned into the assault. I think both of them were actually the French lists. I can't remember now, but the French with the colonial troops, they definitely leaned into the assault, right? With tough fighter everywhere. So that was again a little bit of a thing, a surprise. No, maybe not. Depending on the pack here, it may not be a surprise. But being a player who really likes assault armies, like I have my partisans right next to me. I'm still painting on those, right, and they are heavily into the assault. I have my Brits packed up for the weekend, and they are heavily into the assault. I sort of always expect to see a few more assault armies because I think they're really good, but but maybe they're going out. Like with your comping here, the flamethrower limit actually makes sure that we don't see any barbecue armies that have lots of flamethrowers. So maybe assault armies are also on the way out. We don't know yet. There was one list that is leaning into the double air observers, which we already talked a bit about this. It's you either win big or you lose big, right? Either the airplanes
Mhm.
are going to come in and absolutely devastate the opponent, take out his tiger or whatever, and or then just not going to come in, or they're going to hit your own troops. And so it's a really high risk, high reward list. But I always love to see those. And actually, for this weekend, we also have one of the Danes I'm driving to Holland with, who's bringing an artillery observer list, like double air observer for Americans. So it is a
Oh,
thing. Yeah,
ouch.
yeah. Double air observer, right? That's 4 shots. If you can get them all to come in, that will be devastating. There were 2 lists that had multiple vehicles, transport vehicles, motorized, mechanized lists, um, trying to get up early onto the board. I think these guys have read your missions, which I kind of like, that they actually read the missions and think, well, this could do well. I need something to move up. There were 2 or 3, depending on how you look at it, that had multiple HE, that had maxed out on what they could take of HE. Again, one of the French lists did this. And there was one outflanker list, the Finnish one with the Caucapachos, which is always kind of interesting to see if they're worth it. Was this the spread that you were also expecting for your tournament here? The how the lists were actually structured? Were there any surprises for you?
I would say, well, the double air observer. A quick comment on that one. So that was Ed Fegan's list, and the first one that he sent me was actually the one that I was really dreading to have to see. Was he sent me Gurkhas with double stewards? And I was like, oh no, this is what I'm avoiding. Like, come on, like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know. There are a lot of like, so I had a bit of a discussion with him, and I was like, all right, well, if you're gonna take this, either we need to limit it down to give new players a bit of a chance,
yeah.
or take something a bit more fluffy. And so he opted towards the double air observer list, and I'm like, that's fun.
That is
Um,
fun.
this
That is
this
really
is going to
fun.
be it. And quick comment about the motorized lists. So just overall, nobody saw my missions ahead of time, but
Oh yeah, that's right. You
the
didn't send out the missions. We actually released the
yeah,
missions here first. So yeah, so they couldn't.
yeah. So, but
Interesting.
the players who know me, a lot of the players who came to this event have been to pretty much every single event that I've hosted, which is pretty awesome. Um, but so they kind of you pick up on
Mm.
if you have a TO that you like,
Likes.
or if
Yeah,
you go
yeah,
to their events consistently, you can say, oh well, if I'm going to Jax's tournament, I know he's going to want us to go in the middle, or he's going to try and prioritize movement, at
yeah,
least in a couple of his missions.
yeah.
So while I didn't release the pack, I like trying to like players have all my missions from prior
Mm.
tournaments and stuff, so they can kind of see like, okay, well, what's he thinking about a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I definitely liked seeing this spread. I absolutely love seeing the Death Star lists. You were very right that
Yeah.
the pack encouraged people to take the
It
heavy
really
tank,
did.
take the
Yeah,
super heavy
yeah,
tank, or things like that.
yeah.
Um, but overall, I'm very happy with the spread. Um, and while I guess I didn't necessarily expect nearly as much skirmish,
Mm.
I'm glad that players are going a little bit outside the box, taking the outflankers, taking
Yeah,
the air observer, taking a bunch of
yeah,
different things,
yeah.
um, to try and kind of follow their whimsy a bit.
Mm. And I also think that there are no lists here that are in the list build considered overpowered, right? Because you limited multi-rocket launchers, because you limited heavy howitzers, because all of those things actually encouraged like toolbox lists. So that's really good.
Mhm.
Um, my phone is ringing like crazy. I'm just going to have to see if there's someone important on it. Just a sec. Sorry about that, everyone. Since I am packing up and driving to Holland, there are a couple of important phone calls that need to be taken. Sorry about that. Right. Next one is, so the main takeaways for me that one, you didn't limit stewards, but there were no one taking a steward. Not a single Dhaka anywhere. That is amazing. I really love that. That the pack and the players can sort of feed into and sort of read what it is that we're expected to do, and then everyone does it. We could have had like one guy, as you just said, bringing Gurkha stewards and just rocking through everyone else, and he would of course have lost on thematic and sportsmanship, but he would have won all his games possibly. But no one took the stewards. I really like that people can clearly see what kind of event this is. What do I take? Hmm, I am going to do that and that and that, and it really means that the pack works. It does. For me, there was a surprising though lack of Soviet lists and British lists. Because these are clearly considered the top dogs. So I was expecting that maybe one or two extra players would want to take something where they felt comfortable that they could win their games and be thematic at the same time. But
Mhm.
you know, people bring their labors of love to events like this, where you also get points for bringing labors of love. Um, the other thing that stands out is that there were 8 lists that were dual platoons and 15 that were single, which is a very high number. Again, if we're looking at it from a competitive standpoint, which means that people are not bringing competitive armies; they're bringing thematic armies, because if they were bringing competitive armies, they would double up on platoons. It's pretty clear that double platoons is better than single platoons because you can take two of everything that's good, right? Having double
Mhm.
mortars or double snipers or whatever. Um, so for me, that's also very clear indication of you succeeding with your pack in actually getting people to follow the intentions of the pack as well. Um, and just to reiterate, the high points plus a dice cap, as you said, Jackson, it sort of equals. We're going to see heavy tanks. We're going to see those Death Stars. It's more or less a given that that will happen, and it works. It really does. So if you want to see Tigers at your event, give people a lot of points, single or maybe double platoon, and then a dice cap. They're going to have to spend their points on something. Um, and if you even give them like a thematic bonus for bringing a cool tank, then that's what they'll do. We're also seeing large infantry units because people again are of course trying to limit their dice, so they're going to have to make their infantry units bigger, which is very nice to see. And lots of gear again, spending points on LMGs or assault rifles and all that, which is basically what you wanted, isn't it?
Yeah. I wanted players to take what they wanted, and follow, like lean into a little bit. Like I know
Yeah,
with Germans, they had all the tech. Deck them out with the assault
yeah,
rifles and the Panzerfaust. Give them double LMGs.
yeah.
Although I know, at least in a lot of your meta reviews, you're like LMGs on an infantry unit. Get that out of here. Like
Yeah,
no.
they're competitively not worth it at all. But for an event where you get theme score and you get sportsmanship score and you want them to bring historical armies, they are absolutely spot on. Competitively, points for value, no. But for this event, yes, definitely. Um, so yeah, I really like that. It's so clear that you can see the intention of the pack in the outcome of the lists here. So we get to the big event. My predictions. This again, I'll just reiterate. This is only victory points earned at the table at the game. For me, I think we're going to see these five come out on top. I have David K with his 15 order dice Soviet tough fighter veteran spam. We already talked about that list. That was an intense list with a lot of veterans in it. So it's going to be really difficult to kill. And then Ben with his 16 order dice skirmishing Americans. Love Americans when they do skirmish well. They really do it well because of that move and fire rule. So skirmish Americans are like the best way to set up Americans, and at the same time it can be very thematic and historical. So it's a really nice combo actually to have Americans with skirmishing capabilities like BARs in the units and um, yeah, maybe a Hellcat or something that has skirmish capability, has that moving back and raking and stuff.
I mean, the
Then
at
we have
least talking about Ben's list real quick. The key here is his double veteran Chaffee,
yeah,
and so he has the gyro stabilized turret and Reki. So it's like
yeah,
like
yeah,
he's picking the tank for the job for the Americans
yeah,
in my
yeah.
view.
Yeah, and at the same time, it feels for me like it's thematic because it's not the Dhaka Steward, right? It's not like something that feels overpowered. It's something that might be in a late war American list with where they have all the BARs, where they have Chaffies to support them. So yeah, might have shifted one of them out for a Sherman, but whatever. It works for me. It really works. And then we have Sean with a 16 order dice Dak Schützen list. That is going to be really, really cool to see. And if he's painted them up nicely, dark with those light, dusty colors, and yeah, that's just going to be really good. Um, and they are also really good on the table. So I'm sort of again expecting this to be a good skirmishing army that can win games. we already talked about a little bit that he is maybe lacking a little bit of anti-tank capability. So that might be his one hurdle. And then, of course, since I am sitting here painting my partisans, I could not go without saying that I think Jason's 15 order dice partisans, which has skirmish and push units like veterans units with SMGs and stuff, um, that might actually also do really well. Partisans can be a little finicky, and they don't have the best special rules in the game, but they do have some really nice units. So that might also do well. And then
Yeah.
Ed, if he does what his double air observers are supposed to do, he will absolutely destroy anyone. I would not want to play against Ed's 16 order dice Americans if he's lucky with his dice. If he's unlucky, he'll just get obliterated in every game. And that's yeah. So those are my 5 top picks. What do we think?
Yeah, I just going about the players themselves.
Yeah,
They're all these lists are going to excel at the missions. I think
yeah,
have a lot of mobility. Speaking a bit on Jason's list, I thought it was funny in your first video. You were like, "All right, if I were to do this, I'm going to take partisans with double bazooka, double howitzer."
yep, yep,
Jason heard that
yeah.
and was talking to me. He's like, "Hey, I was thinking about bringing my Soviets with the Katyusha, but Bo said partisans. Let's run it." So that was hilarious. That Jason was like, "You know what? I'm gonna follow
I'm
it,
doing it.
and
I'm
we'll
doing
run
it.
with it." Yeah, and I mean, with their I've played against Jason a handful of times, and the partisan bombs
Yeah,
really give a very good area denial,
it
and
does.
because players get scared of them.
Yeah,
I just run
which is
forward and
kind of
say,
weird
"Screw
because
it, let's go."
they're
But
not that dangerous actually. Yes, if they hit, they're really dangerous, but most of the time players will just stay away from them. So area denial, perfect, really good. And if you can use
yeah,
that to your advantage, yeah, that's really good.
yeah. So I think Jason very much knows how to use his partisans, and they are very scary. I mean, he threw like squads of 15, all with SMGs and stuff like
Mm,
that, and it's just like, oh no, if they get into close combat or if they get
yeah,
close, you're
I,
gone.
you're
Um,
absolutely they'll shred you. Yeah.
yeah, and the double air observer. Um, so while across my metrics, I had like, okay, did you take a mortar,
Mm,
sniper, artillery, flamethrower, launcher, observer, and did you have free units? No single list went for all the categories,
mm,
but Ed's was close
yeah.
with five
Yeah.
or five, four or five.
Yeah.
So the fact, yeah, five. Here we go. So the fact that Ed was still able to maximize the most in his packet,
Mm,
um, taking double air observers because they're pretty expensive.
yeah.
Um, the fact that he was able to take both, he has 4 vehicles in his list, so extremely mobile. Um, has artillery, has 2 flamers, has
Mm,
snipers, so he can pick out the lieutenant or an enemy observer if
yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
I think he still has all the tools in the bag, like you said. Whether the dice are going to very much drive his success, I think even if his observers both flub, he still has the tools to pull out a late win.
Yeah. Yeah, but it just takes a little bit more skill if his observers flop, especially if they call in the airplane on himself, then that always
Yeah,
sucks.
yeah, that
Right,
is no fun.
that is no fun. Right. So that was my predictions for Operation Cricket. Jackson, I will get back to you once the operation is done, and you can tell us all about how it went and whether or not we were right in our predictions. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And Jackson, thank you again for tuning on here early in the morning in the States, afternoon for me. And right, we'll see you next time. Cheers.
All right, yeah, thank you for having me on the channel, Bo.
You're welcome. And I'll just have to end it there. Cheers.